The net zero con will leave millions of citizens dependent on state handouts. It isn't a theory, it's an agenda. There is no climate emergency. On air 24/7. This is today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this live broadcast here on Monday. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. Thank you guys for rejoining us for this important program today. We're going to have a very important discussion as well right now about the International Center for 9/11 Justice, the work that it's doing, and particularly one individual who has a very long-running case right now, and we're going to get some updates on this situation. I want to introduce Matt Campbell. He is the older brother of Jeff Campbell, who was a British citizen killed on September 11th, 2001 in the World Trade Centers. And while attending various conferences and meetings over the years, also filing his own legal challenges in the UK, Matt Campbell has really discovered a lot about 9/11 and a lot that hasn't really made it properly into the public discourse on this. And besides seeking justice for his family member, Matt's also wanting to air the truth about what happened on 9/11. That's part of it. This is an important subject. I know that this is a long-running controversy and a case, but no better time than the present to get right down to it. I want to welcome onto the program Matt Campbell right now. Matt, how are you?
I'm fine. Thanks, Patrick, for having me on.
No, it's our pleasure, Matt. And I want to go to also the headlines right now on the website, the International Center for 9/11 Justice. Here we have family of 9/11 victim vows to keep fighting for a new inquest after the UK Attorney General denies them a second time. The UK's Attorney General's failure to correctly apply the law for a second time is beyond negligent, says the center. It is a cruel obstruction of our rightful pursuit of the truth about Jeff's murder. Jeff, your brother, who was killed in September 11th. Matt, first of all, welcome to the program. And for those of our listeners and viewers on TNT who aren't familiar with your case, if you just give yourself a brief introduction, yourself and also this story.
Yeah, so my brother Jeff was attending a conference on the 106th floor of the North Tower on 9/11, and obviously, he died that day. Within a couple of months, I started to question things about what we were being told. In particular, it was triggered by an article written by the late John Pilger, who sadly just passed away. And I've been fighting this now. I mean, we're 22 and a half years on. For about 10 years, I've been wanting to get my brother's inquest reopened. And so to say it briefly, basically, his remains were identified. They were repatriated back to the UK, and along with 9 other British victims, an inquest was held. This was back in January 2013. It was very much a kind of tick the box, rubber stamp kind of process. My brother's life and death was discussed in about 3 minutes. The whole inquest was done in about 100 minutes. And, very much just copy and paste of the official narrative. And within about a year of that, I just started to think, actually, there's a lot of evidence out there that points towards the fact that the towers were demolished and not just brought down by a plane and the fires, etc. And knowing what I know now, which is basically no investigation was done whatsoever, which, by law, the coroner is supposed to investigate how someone died, how they came about their death. To just do a sort of cut and paste job from the 9/11 Commission report, was shocking in itself anyway. And so, a couple of years ago, we submitted a 2,500 page application to the coroner, and that's under the 1988 Coroners Act. It's a mechanism by which families of deceased people, where you believe that justice has not been done or the truth's not been told, there's a mechanism to try and get that inquest reopened. And so that's what we tried to do. They sat on it for nearly 2 years, and this is last June, and turned around and said they're denying permission, even though we gave them abundant new evidence that wasn't considered at the first inquest, and also just insufficiency of inquiry. So they basically denied us then. We threatened judicial review, which is a legal mechanism to challenge, what an authority has made in terms of a decision. Surprisingly, they backed down. So we were at this stage, this is last September, pretty confident. Okay, they've got to make a new decision. It's going to be a positive one, and my brother's inquest will be reopened. Fast forward to January, beginning of this year. They denied it for a second time, and that's pretty much where we're at right now. And I can go into more detail about what the next stage is, but it's disgusting that they've, we're talking now 2.5 years from when we first made that initial application, and this second denial, there's not really anything new. They're just making some more broad sort of statements as to why they're denying us the right to have a new inquest.
So the British government, effectively, the establishment, the judiciary, stonewalling you on this issue, on this case. And why do you think I know they're giving their, boilerplate reasons for it, Matt, but why do you think there is a sort of fear by the establishment to reopen a case like this? What might they be afraid of?
I think firstly, it's just standard lawfare. They're trying to exhaust you both time-wise and money-wise. That for sure is going on. I think the biggest concern they've got, and this is without even going into the details of what happened, is simply a family member is trying to bring into court evidence that contradicts an official narrative. And in this case, obviously, of something quite big, be it 9/11. I think it's a precedent they're very scared of setting, and they're going to do everything they can to try and stop us getting this new evidence into a court.
And so you've actually discovered some interesting things over the years through this investigation, through your research as well, and also bringing in the research of others. Something that would be considered new into the, if you add what you've discovered into the official 9/11 report, the official story, it does change things considerably, but also changes the liability. It changes the culpability from a legal standpoint. If you have, let's say, other parties or foreknowledge of the event, or maybe a different explanation as to how the Twin Towers came down that day. These are all questions that I think that are raised through such an investigation. What are the most compelling pieces of evidence that you have personally discovered throughout this process over these years, Matthew?
Well, I think a lot of the evidence has come to light through the work of, you mentioned, other scholars and organizations like Architect Engineers for 9/11 Truth. This is evidence of the use of explosives. There's traces of thermitic reactions. You've got high temperatures, which can't be reached through normal office fires. You've got, just purely looking at the physics, you've got the collapse of the North Tower, which is obviously the tower my brother was in. It fell at a constant acceleration for about the first 4 seconds. It can't be doing that if it's trying to destroy what's underneath it. It has to deaccelerate. We have numerous eyewitness testimony. That's from first responders, that's police officers, medics, etc., who were there, who were witnesses to explosions, flashes, bombs, etc. We have expert witnesses who, I said, bring the chemistry, the physics, etc., as to why the towers couldn't possibly have come down, due to plane impact and office fires. There's lots of other stuff, I've looked at it over the years, but the actual scope of an inquest is quite narrow. It is really only concerned with what caused someone's death. So it doesn't really go into, who did it, or, the larger groups of people who may or may not have had a role in the attacks. Which in some respects is frustrating, because there is a lot of stuff that's still being covered up today. I won't go into it, but when you look at the the 5 legal firms representing the families in the Saudi lawsuits, which, right from almost day one, that was covered up by the US authorities. And so, yeah, it's narrow in scope, but it's something that we have the mechanism, like I said, through this 1988 Coroner's Act. There is a process. It's well-trodden path. Lots of families have done that when they've lost someone and they don't agree with what the official, explanation is for their death. And it's just frustrating that, I'm still having to fight. And it's not just me, it's my family as well, 22 and a half years on. And yeah, they are stonewalling, and they are making it as hard as possible to get this back into a court.
And I'm just looking at the reporting here, and I encourage people to go to the International Center for 9/11 Justice. That's IC911.org, IC911.org. Hopefully we'll put that on the Chiron there just below where our images are right now. But this is an interesting passage here, which relates to what you're saying, Matt, which is the Solicitor General's only basis for the assertion they're making is to cite reports issued by the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, and to claim falsely that they represent a clear consensus view on the cause of the Twin Towers collapse. So we see this quite a lot, Matt, with other controversies where you have institutions that make initial rulings. Those rulings are challenged. The whistleblowers are then demonized. Any contradictory or counter narratives are suppressed. The OPCW is a good example with the Duma chemical weapons attacks in Syria. Piers Robinson, part of the research group that's been leading the opposition on that, they've all been attacked. And here we have anybody challenging NIST or the United States National Institute of Standards and Technology. So this ultimate deference to these institutions, we see this in Britain a lot. They will defer to the United States, and that's it. Britain doesn't have any interest in independently finding out any facts or what happens. We're fine. This is what the U.S. says. We're good with that. Move on, basically. And I think your case kind of really exposes that sort of level of, I don't know, this kind of opine complicity that we see in this relationship between the British establishment and the U.S. It's amazing, Matt, that a relatively small case like yours, in the grand scheme of things, exposes these massive issues that are just prevalent in the international system. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, the frustrating thing about them actually citing the NIST report is it wasn't even put in front of the coroner. So their arguments for not allowing us to have a new inquest is, but there's a report over here. I mean, that's not applying the law. That's not what the coroner, should have done. And in any case, the NIST report only goes up to collapse initiation. It doesn't actually go into what caused the towers and how they actually came down, and ultimately how my brother was killed. So they're deferring to, yes, an official body, but it has no relevance whatsoever to certainly the new evidence that we put in front of them, in front of the Attorney General, because NIST doesn't look at or even acknowledge or discuss the possible use of explosives. I mean, there's I'm sure you've read the response that they gave us. I mean, they're talking about our evidence not being credible, but in the same breath, they're saying, but we're not going to have any experts actually look at your evidence. They've not given any rational examples of why our evidence isn't credible. It's pretty much more of what they did last June, which is it's frustrating. I'm just hopeful that we can raise enough funds to apply for judicial review again, and hopefully this time they'll either let us go to court, because I think we'll have better luck there than them constantly hiding behind these decisions that are unlawful and irrational, that the Attorney General seems to think they can get away with doing and making time and time again.
I think a lot of the evidence, especially in recent years, is very compelling. You look at the work of Dr. Leroy Halsey from the University of Alaska Fairbanks on the Building 7 phenomenon. And, from a structural engineering point of view, from a scientific point of view, an exhaustive study, the conclusions are pretty clear at the end of that. And I have yet to see anybody to properly refute these findings by Halsey and also his other colleagues from the organization which you mentioned before, Engineers and Architects for 9/11 Truth. There hasn't really been any real ability to refute those claims. And the evidence that they're putting forward, the analysis they're putting forward, certainly in a court of law, should be an inquest, an inquiry should be concerned with the facts in order to get the historical record correct, especially on such an important event like 9/11 that transformed the geopolitical landscape. It transformed the Middle East for generations. Wouldn't you want to get the truth? Wouldn't you want to get to the facts? Eventually, Matt, those facts are going to be accepted as the consensus story, but not now, not yet. But eventually they will. History shows that eventually the truth will come out. Your thoughts on that side of things?
I mean, yeah, very much so. Eventually the truth will come out. I hope we're at that point now. It seems you have to sort of have a minimum sort of 20 years. I look back at historical cases of, say, Bloody Sunday, Hillsborough, etc. You do need a passage of time, before what probably family members were screaming out loud way back from day one, finally gets heard. I mean, you mentioned Building 7. I mean, it is part of our application. Obviously, my brother wasn't in that building. I mean, the evidence is compelling, but what's really frustrating, and I sort of sense it from my barrister a lot, is the level of evidence, or the amount of evidence we have. We're so far above a kind of threshold that would normally be required in order to trigger a new inquest. We can absolutely 100% prove that there was no inquiry whatsoever into how my brother died, and it should be just straightforward. We shouldn't be having to have this battle in the legal system. But like I said, I mean, I'm more confident that actually once we go into the High Court, that's where we will get some semblance of justice, because their hand will be forced. The Attorney General can kind of hide. They can do these letters which don't really make the public light of day. Whereas in a court of law, everything's going to be on record. And I'm more hopeful that we would actually get more justice there. But it's a long process. And like I said, our first step is to get this judicial review of this, frustrating second decision that's denied us again.
Certainly, I think you're not alone, Matt. There's a lot of other people, victims' families. There's a lot of residents in New York, Americans, people around the world that want to see that happen. And I think your case is a really important part of that. But before we wrap this segment up, Matthew, I want you to just to give us an idea, give us your thoughts. What has this been like, this long-running battle? What has this been like for you personally and your family? Because this has been going on now for over 2 decades. If you can just talk about that, I think a lot of people would really like to know more about that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, within a couple of months, I started questioning things. I absolutely hated what was going on in Afghanistan, and then obviously Iraq, which was just made up stuff for reasons why there was war in Iraq. And I found it particularly hard just because the more evidence came out, and this is not just focused on how the towers came down. This is other things like the CIA actively protecting 2 of the hijackers, the involvement of Saudi intelligence, Saudi government, etc., which bit by bit has come out over the years. It's frustrating, and I found it really hard the first 10 years. I'll tell you the truth. Feeling that I felt completely powerless. I didn't know what to do. Compounded by the fact I'm over here in the UK. All the legal stuff, all the families that were vocal seemed to be US based. And I think it was when I guess I went public with how I felt back in 2013, and I did a few documentaries, and yeah, I just connected with people, and then I kind of thought, actually, no, there is a way, of fighting this. There is evidence out there. It's that thing of, like I said, in lawfare, it's getting the funds necessary to mount these kind of challenges, because it's not easy. And for me, the only way to do this in any way it's ever going to be done is through the legal system, whether you like the system or not, and whether you think it's geared against you. It's all I can do, really. I mean, what do they say? The wheels of justice turn very slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. I do think there'll be justice eventually. It just might take a long time. Unfortunately, time isn't on our side. We have it's time sort of locked in that we have to respond to this decision by the I think it's the 3rd of April, which for obviously the barrister needs to do work, etc., and we need to raise the funds. We need to raise the funds by the end of this month, basically March 1st. Otherwise, we won't be able to mount this legal challenge. So, I mean, the pressure is on to we're trying to raise a scary amount of £60,000. It's so frustrating that we should be forced to do this again. But that is lawfare. There's not much else we can do. I'm just hopeful that someone and many people will chip in and help try and get this, my brother's inquest reopened, and this evidence that no one's ever seen in a court of law, and expose stuff once and for all.
And where's the best place for people to go to support your campaign? Matt, I know the International Center for 9/11 Justice website, ic911.org. 911 Justice.
Yeah, there's a link underneath there. Sorry, Patrick. Yeah, there's a link underneath there that takes you to a crowdfunder website where, the easiest thing is to go to ic911.org. And you'll see a link to the inquest and raising funds for that. But like I said, we've got 4 weeks basically, or just shy of 4 weeks now, to try and raise this money. So pressure's on.
Big thank you to Matt Campbell for this hour. We got more coming up on the other side. You want to stay with us? Sam Husseini, Mark Crispin Miller, big issues. We're going to cover them all in a few minutes. Stay right there.